Welcome to InterviewPro. In the last video, we learned how to use error boundaries in React application to prevent the entire application from crashing whenever there is an error in a component. Let's try to recap what we did. We had three components in our application: home, about, and contact us. And we generated an error in about component that resulted in a blank page. That means our entire application was not working. Then we made the application better by wrapping all these components inside a error boundary. When we did that, we displayed a message, something went wrong to the user. And we tried to make the application even better by wrapping each of these individual components with error boundaries. In this case, the user was able to access home and contact us even though there was an error in about page. And at the end of the video, I asked you to try the error boundary concept when there is a routing in your application. So let's discuss how we can achieve that in this video. In our example, we'll have a header component where we display the links to each of these components. When we click on home link, it would render home component. When we click on users, it would render users component. Similarly, about and contact us. And when there are no users in the users component, we'll throw an error. And when we throw an error, only this component should display the error. All other components should be accessible by the user. Let's see how we can achieve this in this video. This is our example. This is the same example which we used in the video on lazy loading. If you don't understand this code, I would recommend you to go through the video on lazy loading. So we have header component and we have routes for each of the home, users, about, and contact component. This is how the UI looks. We have a header component with 4 links: home, users, about, and contact us. When I click on home, we'll see the home page. When I click on users, the URL updates to /users and we display the list of users. About, the URL is updated and we see the about component, and same is the case with contact us also. Now, let us try to generate an error when there are no users in the in this component. As of now, we are hard coding the list of users. This is the list of users. Now, let me comment these users so that there won't be any users to display. When there are no users, I want to throw an error. Let me add an if statement here. Users.length equals 0. Throw new error. So we have the error ready. Let's save the changes, go back to UI. And as expected, this has crashed the entire application. And if we go to developer tools console, we see the error message. And what we did to prevent this, we added this error boundary in the app.js. So let's wrap all these components inside error boundary. If we go back, okay, we have to import error boundary. Now we see the message, something went wrong. As we discussed in the previous video, it's not ideal to make the entire application display the same error message when only a single component has failed. In our case, only users component failed to render. All other components are still fine. So what we can do is, instead of wrapping everything inside a single error boundary, we can wrap the routes also in a separate error boundary. If there is any error in header component, this error boundary will take care of it. If there is any error in these routes, this error boundary will take care of those errors. Now let's go back to the UI. Let's go to home, refresh. Now we are able to see the home component, about, contact us. Let me go to users. Since we don't have any users, we are seeing this message, something went wrong. So once the error is generated, I'll go to about contact us home. So once the error is generated, we are not able to access other components. This is because the URL is changing and the component to be rendered is changing. But there is no way to tell error boundary to reset the value of has error, correct? So the state will still be has error true. Let me show it to you. I'll display the has error state. Now I'm displaying the state also along with something went wrong message. If we go back, I'll click on users, has error is set to true. Even if I go to about and contact us, this is still set to true. We should find a way to make it false. In our previous example, everything was in same page and the components were rendered without any change in the route. But here, due to the change in route, the components are changed. So we are simply updating the error state to true, but nowhere we are resetting it to false. So let's find a way to reset it. In order to update the state, there is another lifecycle method called component did update. We have already discussed in detail about all these lifecycle methods in our previous videos. You can go to React playlist and watch a video especially on this life cycle method. So in this life cycle method, this method will receive two properties. One, previous props, and previous state. So let's try to implement a mechanism where we will receive the path in the props and we'll try to compare if the path which we received previously and the current path are equal or not. If it is equal, this error state will not be updated. If it is not equal, that means we moved from one route to another route. In such case, we have to reset it, right? So we'll have something in the if statement. And inside this if statement, we'll set has error to false. But where do we find the uh, path name? So let me comment this for now, otherwise we'll receive error. I have created a higher order component where it takes the component and returns a new component. So why am I talking about higher order component here is I want to access a route, current route and previous route. For that, I need to make use of use location hook. Since error boundary is a class component, I cannot use location hook here. So I need to make use of functional component. Even if I create a functional component and get use location, how would I pass it to error boundary? That can be passed using higher order components. So using higher order components means we have to, so our higher order component is with router. I'll wrap error boundary with router and we have to import this here. Import with router. Now we have a higher order component. What this does is it takes error boundary as input and returns a new component. So what is that new component? I am accessing a location using use location hook. Uh, with router, a higher order component is a functional component which takes a component as input. Inside this higher order function, we can use a class component or a functional component. And since we need use location, I am using a functional component here. And I'm naming that functional component as new component. That component will have some props. Inside this component, we'll use this hook and I'll store the object returned by use location in a constant called location. In our example, we don't need this navigate, but I have just added to show that we can pass multiple additional properties. So now we have this data. We need to pass this data to our error boundary. So error boundary in this case is nothing but original component. To this original component, I will pass navigate and location as properties. Along with these new additional properties, we need to make sure that the original properties which this component is originally receiving are preserved. If we don't mention this, the original properties of this component will be lost. So make sure you add this at the end of all these parameters or properties. So we have added the information that we require and passing them to the error boundary. In this error boundary, now we have access to location. Let's console log and see what is present in this dot props. Okay, let me go to UI. Let's just refresh. From home, I'll go to users and we have few console logs here. So if you look at this, usually props will have children, but since we used the higher order component and added two other properties, location and navigate, we are seeing these properties also in the props object. Inside location, we have a property called path name. So we are going to use this path name to see if we are in the same component or we came from a different route. So let's go back to the code. Here, I'll uncomment this if block. We don't need this console log. So what we will check here is if previous props dot location dot path name not equals this dot props dot location dot path name. Only when the route has changed, we have to reset this property to false. Let's save this, go back to UI. Let's close the console log. I will refresh. Now we see home, about, contact. I'll go to users. There is an error, so has error is set to true. If we go to about, this is loading properly because has error will be set to false. And what happens when it is set to false? It would skip this if block and returns the props.children. Props.children here is nothing but the component rendered with this route. So about, lazy about will be rendered using slash about. And if we go to contact us, this would come here and lazy contact us will be loaded when slash contact us route is triggered. Another advantage of using error boundaries around lazy loaded routes is, as I discussed in the lazy loading tutorial, that in the fallback, you can either pass a simple text or a HTML tag or another component as well. So if there is any error in the component which we used for fallback while loading this component, if there is an error, this error boundary will take care of that error. So whenever you use lazy loading, uh, if you use a fallback component in the suspense, make sure you wrap error boundary around that component. Let's recap what we did so far. We had an application which has a header component and it has links to four components: home, users, about, and contact us. In users, when there are no users, it would throw an error which led to the entire application to crash. Then we wrapped all these components within error boundary. So instead of showing blank page, we displayed a message, something went wrong, but still user was not able to access header, home, about, and contact us. To solve this issue, we wrapped error boundary around header component and around the routes to these components. Then we were able to see header component, home, about, and contact us. Only users component was displaying something went wrong message. This is how we can use error boundaries when your application uses routing. I hope the concept is clear. If you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe to InterviewPro. Thank you.